Welcome, listeners, to www.ironradio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. With your hosts, Lonnie Lowery.
Remember, Phil is like a gnarled old oak tree held together with scar tissue and bone spurs.
Rob Fortney.
And I'm telling you, the pain that I would suffer was beyond excruciating.
And Phil Stevens.
Just do it, Rob. You'll kill all those nerves.
Thanks for listening. Welcome, Iron Radio listeners. This is Lonnie Lowery. I'm an exercise physiologist and a sports nutritionist, and I'm a former competitive bodybuilder. I'm going to add a few sort of preamble type notes and offerings before we get to our topic of the day. The guys and I, everybody got together and just recorded a brief episode, but it's just sort of, fun, opinionated stuff. Dr. Nelson actually sent me a text and said, why don't we do something about the holidays, specifically Festivus, which is just sort of funny. It's sort of anti-commercialism type stuff. So we just have sort of a silly discussion in our topic. It's a special Sunday. It's Christmas Eve. And so I don't know how many people are going to listen, but just in case you need some ear candy, something to bide your time while you're putting up with distant relatives or what have you, then here you go. What we're going to do in this little preamble is a little bit of housekeeping type things, but also some recipes. I thought I would offer a few very brief holiday ideas. They're more concepts than recipes, really, that might be specific to lifters. Two of them are going to be for boosting calorie intake in sort of a healthy way at this time of year. And then two of them are going to be ways to actually cut a little bit of calories without completely rehabbing some of the most fantastic meals, I think, of the year. So I am not personally a fan of recipe rehab, for example, like making completely altered versions of everything on my Thanksgiving or Christmas or New Year's table. But there are some things you can do to just sort of, if you've got a physique goal earlier in the spring or something like that, that's what those will be. Some sort of calorie dilution type things or alternative ideas that you might include with your meals. Part of this was... It was just very serendipitous, in line with an email that we got from Neil. So thanks, Neil. We're definitely on the same page right now. He says, "Hey, Lonnie, thought it would be fun for the host and listeners to weigh in on Christmas bulking. What foods should you seek out during the holidays to pack on those calories? I got this idea yesterday when I was joking with my brother after a squat workout if it was okay to utilize eggnog as my post-workout supplement. Lol. Some other ideas might be things like stuffing, like sausage. Put some extra protein and fat in your sausage, extra gravy, pie. There's definitely some things that are very calorie dense this time of year. In fact, before I go on, let me add, I don't know if anybody can top this. I would love to get an email. The most calorie dense, energy dense food that I can imagine that I have come across is pecan pie. It's so loaded with butter and nuts and sugar, like per slice, it'll blow your mind. So if you're a hard gainer, I don't want to hear it. Go eat some pecan pie because damn. Anyway, so thanks, Neil, for this. He says, keep up the good work. So two of our things are going to be about adding calories. And let me offer the first one. It is, in fact, eggnog based. I don't know if you've ever looked, but eggnog... Its calorie information on the nutrient facts panel, nutrition facts, is for half a glass. And I mean 4 ounces. Now, a typical coffee mug is about 12 ounces. So this stuff is rocking loaded with sugar and fat. And yeah, there's some protein in there too. I tend to actually go for the light eggnog so I can have twice as much. It's still really quite sugary, but they cut down the fat a little bit. But sugars and fats being our main fuels, right? But if you are bulking this time of year and you don't want to just sort of meaningless bulk, now don't get me wrong, sometimes it's great just to have some eggnog, little nutmeg or whatever, and even some rum in there, something unfooled around with as far as a recipe rehab thing, physique type thing. But if you really want to sort of justify it, I would try an eggnog shake. If you just throw unflavored or vanilla whey protein in with some eggnog and some ice cubes. I usually put about a cup or so of eggnog or light eggnog with about 7 ice cubes and just a scoop of, like I said, vanilla whey, something like that. Then you've got the 20 or 25 grams of high-quality protein that you can actually put to work with all those calories. So that's number one. I would suggest, if you like eggnog, try an eggnog protein shake. I think they rock, and it's not just fuel; it's actually fuel and building blocks because you're making a protein shake in a blender out of it. My second one, and this is just really a Dr. Frankenstein thing I came up with this year. If you like Chex Mix, and you can get the different kinds, right? If you're avoiding gluten because you have a real reason to, the rice Chex Mix are great. The Chex people, they're really into trying to provide low gluten offerings and that sort of thing. But I like to mix it with the corn, the wheat, and the rice. I actually like the wheat ones the best. I know that's bad because it's gluten. I don't think so. But they're the crunchiest. There's a little bit of fiber. Anyway, you could throw in some, pretzels or things like that. Different kinds of, you can make it more savory or more sweet. But anyway, the little tip that I'm going to offer is I put MCT oil in a misto sprayer. So you could put your own oil in these. They're not expensive. They're like $10 or something. You pump it up and it builds pressure. And because you're supposed to spritz it with some oil or sort of toss it with oil, toss it with something healthy. And now, you got to be careful with the MCT oil because you get up around 15 to 20 grams or so of that stuff at a time, then it can give you diarrhea because you can't absorb it fast enough. It's not toxic or anything. You just can't absorb it fast enough. But when you mist it across the Chex Mix, and let's say you just eat a normal, 1 to 2 cups of the stuff, you should be fine. And so that's what I did this year. So medium chain triglycerides, again, the fatty acids are a little bit shorter than the typical dietary long chain fatty acids that make up the triglyceride, the fat, the triacylglycerol. And anyway, by misting it like that, you can get that nice oil, sort of crunchy, browning kind of texture, get that Maillard reaction going for you food science people in there in the oven. And there you go. MCT Chex Mix. Again, just don't overdo it. You might want to try misting it with some of the MCT, but then not too much, and then go with some regular oil in addition to that. But it's a great way to get some carbs, some healthy fats. MCTs, if you look at some of the Japanese research I've mentioned before, but they're uniquely digested and absorbed and metabolized. I do think they are less likely to be stored as body fat. You're going to hear some people exaggerate that fact, but there is some truth to that. Anyway, so I like MCTs for quote-unquote clean calories. So there you go. Eggnog shakes and MCT sprayed Chex Mix are some ideas for you this time of year while you're just trying to get in the extra calories without just completely, trashing it up. What about the K-Cal dilution or alternative ideas? One might be as a way to replace. If you're sick of green bean casserole, and some people love it, you put the little French fried onions on top and whatnot, but, with the mushroom soup and that sort of thing. But a lot of bodybuilders are really sick of green beans because, you the typical chicken breast and green beans on your plate kind of thing, 3-4 times a day. But I'm going to suggest that one thing that you could do, and it's not so much, I guess it would be reducing the calories because there's no sauces involved, but are pan-roasted Brussels sprouts. They are fantastic. You can do it with cauliflower, too. My wife, Kelly, makes some killer Brussels sprout, like, again, pan-roasted Brussels sprouts. All you really do is you sort of toss them lightly in oil of your choice. And, again, you could use a limited amount of MCT if you wanted, or olive oil, something that's generally health-inducing. And you just put it on a cooking sheet, like a cookie sheet, for, 45 minutes or so at 400 degrees in the oven. And what it does to Brussels sprouts, if you don't like Brussels sprouts or if you don't like cauliflower, what this does to them might surprise you. So you might want to give that a shot. It's a nice, fresh, if you want something green on your plate, with all the gravy and mashed potatoes and yams and turkey and ham and that sort of stuff. You want something green, I'm tossing that out there. Some pan-roasted Brussels sprouts. Oh, so good. If you have a different idea, and you're like, well, okay, I don't want to do that so much. No, again, that's a really easy recipe, but and you wouldn't want to get cauliflower in a different way. Again, I'm trying to think of fibrous things that you can sneak in different ways and cut the calories a little bit. Cauliflower mashed potatoes are really not bad. By themselves, meh, they're okay. But I like them 50-50 with real potatoes in the mashed potatoes. But it cuts a lot of the starch out of it. It brings in a lot of those cancer-fighting indoles, being a cruciferous vegetable, right? Cauliflower is potently anti-carcinogenic and that sort of thing. Very low calories, fiber, so again, the healthy phytochemicals and all that sort of thing. So mixing in some cauliflower, and again, try in a limited batch. Maybe if you're good at the stove yourself or your significant other, do a little side batch of this, right? Because you can make your regular mashed potatoes. And potatoes are quite healthy in a number of ways, by the way. And by the way, if you're using potatoes too, red-skinned potatoes have a lower glycemic index on most charts than the brown-skinned white flesh potatoes. Red-skinned potatoes actually have white flesh as well, but their carbohydrates are a little bit slower acting. So it could be advantageous to do some red-skinned potatoes. And then again, on the side, do a little 50-50 mix where you're just microwaving and mashing in some cauliflower along with the potatoes. And again, in theory, it would seriously cut the calories by a third, maybe up to a half, and you get some, health added to your meal. And again, for those of you with physique goals early in the season, it's something to offer. So those are the 4 recipes. The 2 gain ones would be the eggnog protein shakes and MCT sprayed Chex Mix. The 2 sort of alternate calorie-reducing type things would be the roasted Brussels sprouts and the cauliflower mixed mashed potatoes. So something to think about. Okay, on to some housekeeping before we get to the topic of the day. Let me offer some thank yous. The ones that I've noticed most recently, the listeners would be Kurt, Jill, Ryan, and Holly. There's some people on that list that are longtime supporters, so we very much appreciate that stuff. It helps keep the light on here. You guys know that. Iron Radio is listener-supported, in like almost any public radio type format, and it helps keep the advertising from influencing what we do and that kind of thing. Other fun things, we have, if you go to ironradio.org, we have your turn sort of listener editorials. Everybody has a smartphone now. This wasn't true over 9 years ago when we started Iron Radio. Not as true. That you can record yourself very easily. So if you wanted to send us something, if you want to kind of get your feet wet, even if you're doing something in writing, we had Dr. Danielle Cordaro on recently, and she was talking about if you want to get into writing in the fitness and nutrition world, here's some tips. She's actually a writing professor. But if you want to get your feet wet and have us look at it, I will look at it. We're not going to put just anything up. It is sort of reviewed, not in a really peer review what kind of way, but click on a home page. There's basically a big microphone, and you click on that, and you can literally, I would suggest you write it out first, 1 to 2 paragraphs, and then just read it into your phone. You can do retakes, but what you should send should be really pretty polished, and then we can put it in our little library of listener editorials. If there's something that we cover that you have a different opinion on, or if there's something that you just want to get off your chest, that's a great way to do that. You can simply, again, write it up first in a little Word document or on a piece of paper, read it into your phone, send me the audio file, and we will consider it for the website. We really have an underdeveloped kind of portion of the site with that sort of your turn listener editorials. So I really appreciate that, actually. And it kind of, again, some community engagement. Other things that we offer that we really never talk about, we still have a pretty decent article library at ironradio.org. If you want to read the written word instead of just listening, check out the article library. There's stuff in there from all over the place. Some of that stuff is material that I wrote for T-Nation in the past. Some of it's from other websites. But anyway, you might want to check out the article library. Just, again, poke around on our homepage at ironradio.org, and you can find that. And finally, if you have become a supporting member or what we consider significant one-time donor, or whatever you've donated, if you want to email me, it's lawnman7@hotmail.com. Or you can do it through ironradio.org and sort of filter it through Fortress. It's good to keep that boy involved. But the point being is, I don't automatically have your address when you do that sort of thing. But if you were to send me a mailing address and your preference of what kind of little New Year's gift you would like, then I will send you either, if you're a new supporter or a significant one-time donor, like the ad says, we could afford to send you something like a coffee mug or some coasters or something like that, a mouse pad, things of that nature. If you're an existing supporter, you've probably already gotten something from us in the past, but regardless, there's audio tidbits that I want to offer, little behind-the-scenes seminars and that sort of thing. All you have to do is say, hey, Dr. Lowry, can you send me the link to X? Sure. So here's some of the things that you can request. And again, even if you've just been a long-time supporter, like some of the people that I mentioned in the appreciation announcement, but I have a series of lab notes. If you want to know what a nutrition, coffee, sports nutrition, lifting kind of research project looks like behind the scenes, I have lab notes. So you would just simply email me and say, hey, can you send me that link to the lab notes? And I will send you a link or even a series of links. It's literally live. Like I would record it on my way to the lab in the wee hours of the morning. So you want raw. It's pretty raw, but it talks about what we were going to do that day, obstacles we were faced with, trying to overcome. So if you like the sciencey stuff, I will send you lab notes. Again, audio sort of blog. And that's certainly open to long-time existing supporters. If you haven't already gotten this, also for long-time existing supporters, the How to Boost Testosterone seminar, I can send you a link to that. Again, you would have to contact me, and then I could respond to you with the link. And then also Dr. Cordero, she actually sat down with me in an additional behind-the-scenes kind of bonus lecture on finding your niche. So she gave some tips about writing in the fitness and nutrition world, but she has some great thoughts and insights about actually branding yourself. Like, how do you stand out and things of that nature? So I can also send you the writer's branding or writing, finding your niche audio. So again, those would be open to anybody who were to send me a link. If you're a longtime supporter, it's just a way for us to say thank you. Either the lab notes, the testosterone boosting audio clips. Now, that one's a little rough. The audio is a little rough, but there's some good info in there. Or the finding your niche or branding yourself in writing and in publishing yourself. So, and again, that's a long-time existing supporters. The people who are new, I want to appreciate you too. And that's why we'll have our Iron Radio intern. The current intern is Kayla, and we'll work with her to get you a mug or a mouse pad or coasters, things like that, we can just kind of say thank you. All right, having said that, that's the pre-ramble, if you will, and we will go to break. And when we come back, we'll start a mini episode, just being silly, shooting the shit between me and Dr. Nelson and Phil about Festivus, if you're familiar with Festivus and what kind of traditions that entails. We sort of relate it to lifters and the fitness industry. So we'll be back in just a bit. Hey listeners, this is Dr. Lonnie Lowry. If you've ever had anyone critique you on your protein intake as part of your weightlifting lifestyle, oh, you poor meathead, all that extra protein is going to rot your kidneys or weaken your bones or dehydrate you or give you gout or who knows what. There is a book available. You could simply Google CRC Press and Lowry. And what I've done is reach out to experts all over the world and create a book, a single compendium that you can hold up and say, this is why I consume extra protein. This can be very valuable when you're being quote-unquote educated by various professionals on the topic. There's an enormous amount of literature in this book on the safety, the effectiveness, how protein works in cells, the history of protein and weight trainers, much more. So again, please check out CRC Press and Protein and Lowry. You can just Google that. And I do, full disclosure, I do make a small single-digit royalty on the book. But that's not why I did it. I did it so we can all have something, our particular population, to both defend what we do and to inform our nutrition and our eating. Thanks.
I can't stop feeling. Some of us don't understand how lucky we are to be living in this.
Hi, listeners. This is Rob Fortress Fortney. I'm here to remind you that as the holiday season approaches and your thoughts turn to giving, we like you to keep Iron Radio in your thoughts.
Over the past several years, there have been hundreds of listener comments hoping that Iron Radio stays on the air for years to come. Iron Radio is here for you. But as with any public radio type format, the show is listener supported. That's where you come in. For just $4 a month, you become a supporting member, keeping your weekly dose of education, experts, and gym talk flowing. Just go to www.ironradio.org and click on the $4 monthly subscribe button near the bottom of the page.
Or click the donate button at the right of the page for a one-time donation. You are the Iron Brotherhood and Sisterhood.
Of course, not everyone can afford to be a supporting member or a significant one-time donor. But for those of you willing to pitch in, $4 per month or $50 just once, we're about to sweeten the deal. Become a supporting member or major donor between now and January, and a limited number of you will receive a gift worth over $20. And we will never forget our existing supporters. Simply email me via ironradio.org, and I'll send you a free seminar from Dr. Lowry on how to significantly and realistically boost your testosterone levels. Help your Iron brothers and sisters who cannot pitch in but deserve better internet programming in our sports. And happy holidays.
Iron Radio is, of course, primarily a podcast. But over the years, there have been technical glitches calling for backup streaming and listeners who wanted the convenience of other sources of audio content. Toward this end, Iron Radio is now simulcast and backed up on YouTube. If needed, please search Lawnman07 or Iron Radio from within YouTube. There's not much video, but if you like to listen through YouTube on a Roku or other living room device, there you go.
Like your weekly fix of Iron Radio? In addition to being a popular institute on iTunes, we are also on email. Simply go to www.ironradio.org and sign up for the voluntary email. You'll get a once per week email, no more. That's little more than the show notes and a link to the audio. So go for it.
Welcome, Iron Radio listeners. This is Lonnie Lowry. I'm an exercise physiologist, and I'm a sports nutritionist, and I'm a former competitive bodybuilder.
And this is Phil Stevens. I'm a coach. I run Strength Guild. I also tend to pick up things every now and again in a competition setting. So.
Right on.
This is Dr. Mike T. Nelson. I teach for Rocky Mountain University, faculty member at the Carrig Institute, and owner of the FlexDiet.com.
Cool. All right, folks, we have a fairly brief episode. We're recording this on December 23rd, and so typically this time of year, fewer people tune in. They may be off work, whatever, but, you know, things kind of are rushed. But we thought we'd just kind of put together something a little bit silly. Mike actually sent me some stuff about, because we were talking about what can we do for holiday theme type stuff, and he sent me a link about Festivus. And I don't know if people are familiar, but it started with some of the writers on Seinfeld. It was sort of a, lashing out against commercialism of Christmas. And, instead of a Christmas tree, there's like literally just a bare pole and that kind of stuff. But there's some components of it. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So the four things that I have written down here are the meal or the feast. So we'll talk about what we're going to eat ourselves for, Christmas, New Year's, what have you. There's an airing of grievances, and people remember Seinfeld. That's the funny part. No, we're not going to go on about it, but we're going to air some grievances about what is it about the the fitness community that's just irritating or bizarre, how it's let us down in whatever way. There's a feats of strength, which is funny, and in the episode it was you had to wrestle down the host. And the holiday didn't end unless the person was pinned. It's just funny. But we obviously there's lots of things we can link to strength. So we'll talk about recent feats of strength. What are your goals as a new year approaches, stuff like that. And then the last thing is a miracle. And in the episode, of course, miracles were silly. So maybe we can think of some silly miracles too. So again, everybody knows we do this by the seat of our pants. So here we go. First thing first, the meal. I guess I could start off with this one. I was just before we hit record, I was talking about this. My family's pretty carnivorous, right? So. In addition to the ham, because we usually eat so much turkey, and I think we've talked about this before, but turkey is a great thing people should do more often. Buy a big bird and eat on it. Yeah. Instead of just like turkey, I don't know, lunch meat or however else people normally consume it. But yeah, so we got duck this time as well. We just bought one yesterday, so we're gonna have duck and ham for maximal, meat goodness. Phil, now you're traveling into no man's land. What are you guys doing for meals and stuff like that?
I have no clue. We're winging it, man. Kind of like this show.
Yeah. Okay.
I really don't know. We're going to go to the store when we get there. We don't even know how close one is, and go from there. So like I said, we're going to be in the middle of nowhere for a week, out in the woods.
Yeah.
So,
what's usual? What's usually on your menu?
Usually,
traditional
like turkey, stuff like that. But then what we started doing the last few years is we'd end up going out to eat, and the only place that opens is like a Chinese place. So so we turned that into our tradition. It's like we're gonna go eat Chinese on Christmas because we don't feel like cooking.
Like Christmas Story.
Yep.
Oh, that's funny.
We've done that for 2 or 3 years, but I'm having a feeling there won't be one of those on the mountain. So
yeah, it's gonna be different this year. Yeah.
That's the middle of the woods, like on the mountain setting?
Yeah, we're out in the middle of the woods. Yeah.
Nice.
Cool. Yep. That's cool.
I found something as far back and by itself as I could. So that's where we're heading.
You could just head out and wrestle a deer,
Yeah, there we go.
Drag it home. All right, family. Got it. Got the meal.
Chase down a feral hog with like a stick.
Mike, what about you? You're usually pretty creative with the culinary stuff.
Yeah, so for Christmas Day, I'm up at my parents' place right now. So on Christmas Day, we'll probably have steak and shrimp, which will actually be a day earlier this year since we're going down to visit my grandma actually on Christmas Day since she's 99. We went in last year. We had people to visit her every day except for Christmas Day. And all we heard for a year was like, no one came to visit Grandma on Christmas Day. So, so we're going to make sure we're down there this year. And then up until 2 years ago, historically, we'd always have lutefisk on Christmas Eve. So for people who are not familiar, lutefisk was this white fish that they would soak in lye and that you would somehow consume. So
somehow.
It's the weirdest thing. It looks like fish jello because it turns kind of clear and smells horrible. But I wasn't a big fan of that. But that was a tradition we had for pretty much my entire life growing up.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, old Swedish Norwegian tradition.
Right. So. It sounds foreign to me.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
We have refrigeration now, so we can get better fish. But
Phil was mentioning Chinese buffets. I went to a Japanese buffet. I posted something on Instagram about it, but I was so hungry. You ever get one of those days like we're running around doing Christmas shopping and stuff, and I had done some volume work in the gym the day before, and I was just so depleted, and I annihilated that place because I can still eat like I used to. That's the danger sometimes, right? But so much sushi and sashimi and all that stuff, and it actually made me think about some of the stuff, Mike. If you remember when we were in, I think it's when we were in Japan, yeah, and they had the sort of like the strange clear gelatinous, things.
Everything.
I'm not even know what that is. I'm just ignorant about that. But yeah, so I walked out of there feeling way better. But I haven't destroyed a buffet like that in as long as I can remember, and so that's something I think our listenership can all identify with. Like the Chinese restaurant owner. Oh my God, get these 6 bodybuilders out of here. Just damaging.
They run in fear. We're closed now.
All right, not to be salty, but number 2 on my Festivus list here is airing of grievances. So essentially the idea on the episode, of course, is people talking about how others let them down. What is it about the fitness community that was a letdown? Phil, can you think of anything?
Oh, boy, about the fitness community. I would say the community at large, not just the fitness community. I'm still shocked that, like, people are shocked about drugs in the Olympics. They're like, oh my God. Yeah, we all knew. Just now they're being caught.
Yeah. And we have more proof now than we've ever had.
Yeah, it's tiring.
Athletes at the top level, they just aren't. I mean, there was that study done, I forgot, that they asked like 150 Olympians if they were offered a pill that they would be guaranteed a gold medal, but they'd die in 5 years, how many would take it? And it was some shocking, like 90% said, yeah, I'd take it. I mean, they're athletes at the top level are going to do what it takes to win.
Right. Stop acting like it's scandalous, really, right? Or shocking. Or shocking.
Yeah, it's just reality, and it's going to happen. But,
yeah. What about you, Mike?
Especially as more and more millions of dollars are involved, and that's what they do for their lifestyle. It'd be like, I think it was in Bigger, Faster, Stronger. The one guy was saying is like, well, if you could take a drug that would make you better at your career and possibly earn you millions of dollars, would you do it? And that's how you support your family? It's like, oh, well, if you put it in that context, that's quite different.
Yeah, right. Totally. You're always positive, Miguel, but what about you? Any grievances about training or fitness?
I guess just kind of a overall thing, just the continued kind of argument of, oh, well, experience is better. No, you need education, and it's probably both. And some people are going to be more skewed on one end of the spectrum than the other end, and that's cool. I don't know. It's just the interesting part of, you can always say, oh, well, this coach has 20 years of experience, but they don't read enough research, or the research person, then they're like, but they don't coach enough athletes, So it's, and I think the reality, as we've talked about many times before, is that both of them are useful. We can ask Phil and say, hey, what do you see in the gym? Here's what we're kind of thinking. You could design a study to then kind of look at that. Hey, maybe it comes out with what we expected. Maybe it doesn't. So it should be kind of a back and forth, not a us versus them type mentality.
I think if more people realize that science was reductionist and it's an attempt to model a complex reality. Right, so we were sitting around having a few drinks last night and talking about this, like mathematics, statistics, all these things. They work in probabilities, but unless you have somebody actually go do it, and as an engineer, I'm sure you can appreciate this. Like ultimately, you need feedback from the finished product. So if some training program or nutrition program comes out, right, if it's going to have any kind of external validity at all, you got to actually ask the coaches, hey, is that working for your people, or what percentage of your people, or some kind of feedback so you can have that kind of reciprocal model, for sure.
Yeah, and research, they've done this with medical stuff. They call it like to the bench to bedside model. Mm-hmm. How do we get that to be more of a closed loop model instead of, we do a bunch of research over here and throw it over the wall, and we just try a bunch of stuff over here and throw it over the wall, that type of thing.
Yeah. I see that with clinicians versus scientists too, and so it's similar with the coach versus scientist thing. But the clinicians, they think that they're the pinnacle of the profession because they're out there on the front lines, and ultimately they're calling the shots. But then, like the postdoc PhDs are rolling their eyes at the sort of mid-level clinician, and they're being very smug, like, well, I'm handing down my knowledge to you, and like you said, that both of them are smug and incorrect. And unfortunately, that's kind of what a lot of people, they get into fitness or health-related stuff, and it's flavored by one of these things instead of, like you said, having mutual respect to, make a referral or to ask the practitioner what they're seeing, and then the practitioner saying, boy, I don't know, let's see what the science says, and that's why we have the collaborations, I guess. But,
yeah.
You know what? One for me, I'm airing a grievance. Something that's a grievance for me is the more I look at social media, because we've been looking at running a couple of Facebook ads and things like that for Iron Radio, and just dabbling on Instagram this year and stuff like that, or watching what's on YouTube, is the most watched, the most consumed stuff is almost always the lowest quality. Like, there are so many cheap tricks. Put a picture of someone's ass, on the flash screen of the YouTube video, and people are, because of, the human nature, sex sells, and click, 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 click. And, and when you look at some of this stuff, like I look at some of the modest numbers from not just us, but some of the what I would consider quality information sources, the numbers are so modest compared to the junk. The cheap tricks where people, like I said, they're flashing their ass, or, all a girl has to do, and no fault of her own oftentimes, but is post something of her lifting, and thousands of people will flock to it. And I'm like, And I don't know if that's just more interest in women's lifting. Is that the pervs coming out of the periphery, of the fitness industry, because they just want to watch someone in tights, squatting, whatever it is. But there's a lot of that sort of superficial stuff, and people gravitate toward that instead of the kinds of stuff where they might actually learn something. Fitness, it's always been a bit like that. I mean, I get it, right? From the old guys on the cover of magazines to whatever, but it's just something that I've seen lately, and it is kind of a letdown. You'd like to think that the average fitness consumer, the average training guy or gal would expect a little bit more, but you look at things with millions or even a billion or more hits on YouTube, and I'm like, really? God dang it. So just cheap tricks seems to get rewarded in a lot of ways. So that's my grievance.
Yeah. And I think it's more obvious now because all the metrics are right in front of us, right? So you go to a YouTube video and you can see exactly how many other people have watched it. Or before you're like, oh, this seems popular and it's kind of weird, but yeah, we don't really know how popular it is. Now you can, every time you go to a video, it tells you exactly how many times it's been watched. So you can't really run from the numbers, and it does kind of confirm that is incredibly popular.
Right. And, when the video is a dog throwing up and then eating its own vomit or something like that, and it's got 1.2 million hits, and you're like, well, I weep for humanity. I don't know. Okay.
Yeah. What's the old joke that we have the power of the internet now, and we can have all this information at our fingertips, and we use it to look up all sorts of weird stuff and cat videos.
All right, and cat videos. Yeah. Okay, so that's the feast. That's the airing of grievances. Feats of strength. So, Phil, when you competed last, obviously you were in a different state than you've really ever been before. So, and sort of breaking new ground. So, what were you most happy with your performance when you competed?
I walked out whole. That was the most. That was like my biggest goal, was to not end up in an emergency room. So I crushed that goal. So that's probably the best. I mean, and just getting back to. I mean, I'm not back where I was, but I'm well on my way. Mm-hmm. So that was a neat step. I mean, I fell short of what I'd hoped that meet. I messed up, but no. I mean, it gave me hope for what's to come. I mean, I think I can likely surpass what I ever did. So
yeah, that's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I mean, honestly, at this point, it's like I'm okay if I don't, but it's kind of neat to see if I can. Like since the meet, I've been pretty wrecked, but I think half of that is honestly for me. I think half of it's I'm in the mindset I'm not signed up for something, so it's like I don't need to go squat 600. I'm going to do 405 for some. And that's okay. And I've learned that it's okay. I'm in off season. I can't push it year round. So if I go in and push, if I do something, I'm not going backwards. And I'm still another 12-week peak away from doing well. So that's probably the biggest thing I took from the meet is like literally the other thing I think is that we've preached it before, like strength sticks around for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost took like a 3-year layoff, and it took me a short amount of time to get back to a fairly high level.
Yeah.
So it just proves that's kind of true. I mean, you're not ever once you have it, it's not going anywhere real fast as long as you still stay active. Like, not that I just totally quit, but I mean, it was rare that I squatted more than 315 for a couple years.
Yep.
And then I came back and hit 650 pretty easy. So
yeah, that's something that career longevity will teach you. I mean, I remember when I was teaching in a dietetics department, there was a period of years where I was really like, I don't know, just kind of half-assing it 2-3 times a week. I mean, still kind of going to the gym, but not a lot of purpose. And one day I turned right instead of left on the way home, and I went to my old gym, the bodybuilder's gym, and I've been training there ever since. But it's just that kind of thing, I guess.
Yep.
I think that speaks to the consistency, and then also how much you need just to kind of maintain where you were before. Yeah. And in my experience, I don't know what your guys' experience is, probably similar, is you don't need that much to maintain a pretty high level of where you were before.
No.
But if you just throw in the towel and do absolutely nothing, you kind of drop pretty fast.
Yeah.
But if you're only doing, even sometimes I've gone as low as 1 or 2 sessions a week, that's pretty good sometimes,
Yeah. It's just sometimes it's the reality of it. Like I said, unless you have the career longevity of looking back over 20 or 30 years, you don't have the luxury of looking at 2 and 3 year gaps or ruts or things like that. And it's kind of hard for a 20-year-old to do that, right? They haven't spent enough years under a squat bar to kind of log that and see how that can happen. But yeah, that can happen to almost anybody. And the muscle memory thing, I know people have different ways they interpret muscle memory, but there's something to that. Muscle mass or strength, right? Yeah, I don't know if it's a very, very slow. I know it's a very arguable point that there's a certain amount of muscle hyperplasia over the years and that kind of stuff. But even if it's very, very slow, let's say it's 1% a year. Well, 30 years later, could you have 30% more muscle fibers? Is that the reason why when you touch a weight, you blow back up? I don't know. It's fun to speculate, I guess, But
yeah, and I think there's part of it is that you have that motor program there, and that if you think about learning, right, how many reps you've done of that, it's probably not going to just erode to absolute zero, right? Versus someone who just doesn't have that experience of having that many reps at that load. So it'll feel a little funky coming back and things will be a little weird, but you can kind of go back and access that programming again versus never having it at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, a big part for me was just getting used to that weight on my back again. It wasn't actually doing it. It was just unracking it and making it not feel crushing. Because when you jump from 315 to 600, that's a huge difference. And when I was first doing it, like, oh my God, 500 feels like, it felt like a ton. It's like, I'm not sure I can do this. But, I got to the point again where it's, where I was, where you unrack it and it's like, okay, this doesn't feel that bad. This feels pretty good.
Almost routine.
And that's a big part of it. And for that, I mean, I did a ton of walkouts. I didn't even squat it.
I was going to ask you about that.
I just put it on my back and walk it out and just get used to that. Okay, this isn't, because I tell people all the time, if you pick up a weight out of the squat rack or the bench or whatever, and you unrack it and you're like, oh my God, you're probably you're probably in trouble. But if you can walk it out and you're like, okay, yeah, this doesn't feel bad. I got this. Then you're in a pretty good spot. So
yeah, I think there's something to be said for teaching your nervous system, hey, this is what 500 feels like again. Kind of thing. So you don't go into some kind of panic mode. I don't know.
Yep.
Yeah, I can't say I have a ton of feats of strength myself. Mike, what about you? Past or future goals with strength specifically?
Yeah. So right now, future goals are eventually to lift the Thomas Inch dumbbell, the replica, so the 173-pound replica. Still a ways off from that. I mean, this year I bought a 100-pound replica, so it's actually a solid cast dumbbell with the handles about the size of a can of pop. So it's like 2 3/4 or 2 3/8. So pretty wide. And then when you go to pick the thing up, because it's solid and cast, it wants to spin on you because of that momentum. So that was the interesting part. Then I'll be working back to do more Denny Stones next year again. So this year was primarily just trying to survive travel. And then my 2 main overarching goals are, just to feel better most days. So when I went on a couple of kiteboarding trips, I probably rode longer than I ever have each day, and literally woke up the next day and I was like, oh, that wasn't that big of a deal. You know, you take a few bad crashes, you get a little sore, that type of thing. But so that part was really good. And then working on some vision stuff, eyesight or being able to see in 3D is starting to get better. So my heart rate variability, so marker of stress, like this past month has been pretty good. It's been easier since I've been home and less travel. So even though I'm 43, like this is, I can honestly say this past year, while like the sheer performance numbers were down from where I was in the past, but I feel better and I can do things like even just light squatting again, and I feel fine the next day. Like I actually have soreness in the right areas, not, oh, my left low back feels like it wants to kill me now.
Right, yeah.
So just being able to do more frequency with a lot less warm-ups and just feeling better. And then the last phase, I'm just working on more aerobic-based stuff for about the last couple months, and that's been going pretty good.
Yeah, you know, we were talking about muscle memory and strength and that kind of stuff. I don't know what you guys think, but my experience thus far as a, you know, I'm barely in my 40s now, but still a 40-something lifter. The point being is, with body fat, it's sort of the opposite. Like, I got to the point where I was adding in high-intensity interval stuff for about 20 minutes before I lifted anything 3 times a week. You know, and then just basically cleaning up my diet in the simplest way. I really started getting leaner, you know, and I dropped like 20 pounds the first half of this year. And it's not back, but I'm amazed at how, like, my mom brought over a plate of brownies. I'm like, well, I love brownies. I'll have a couple of brownies. And then I feel like I do 3 months worth of damage in 3 days when it comes to body fat. You know what I mean? It's like you lose ground instantly, you know, as compared to when I was 20 years old, right? Like I could get away with that kind of stuff. But it's amazing how quickly you regress, I think, when it comes to like the body comp kind of stuff. So you have to stay super vigilant because, and then and you know what? Fine. I mean, I'll get back on the elliptical because I actually cut the elliptical out because my body weight, when it went under 200 and then even 195, and I'm like, okay, let's stop that. So I cut back just to once a week with the sort of interval stuff on the bike or the elliptical. But I don't know. All of a sudden, I'm just like, I feel like, hot damn, this is not a good thing. It's coming right back. What the, you know? So, yeah, I'm going to have to re-earn some of the leanness, I guess. You know, it's just amazing how, like I said, it's almost the opposite. Your strength returns very quickly as, you know, as you get older and you've amassed some muscle mass, but then the body fat thing is, it's sort of the reverse. It's very easy to slide backward and to reclaim that kind of stuff. I don't know. That's just at least, you know, my experience. But
how much of that do you think is also kind of lifestyle related too? Because I know you're busy teaching all the time, and so it's, you know, a little bit higher stress. You know, I know for myself, my sleep tends to suffer at that point and stuff too. And when you're younger, it just seems like the resilience you can get by and kind of torch your body a little more, and you kind of bounce back a little bit easier.
Yeah, it's easy to blame age in a lot of ways, but if you think about it, like, I routinely get 6 and 7 hours of sleep a night, and when I was in my 20s, I would sleep 9 hours a night, you know?
Yeah.
Or like you'd go to the gym, and even if you had classes or work or whatever, you could set aside a 2-hour block at the gym. I don't do that now. I don't have that luxury now. So it's easy to say, oh, it's just because I'm older or that kind of stuff. But no, I think there's a lot of things that when you are younger, because of, like you said, your lifestyle, if you're a student, for example, or whatever you're doing, you actually do have more time to sleep, more time to throw into the gym, you know, literally time as a requirement, you know, spend the whole afternoon in the gym once in a while if you want and that kind of stuff.
And you're walking around on campus, that type of thing. I mean, I remember in college sleeping in until I had to set my alarm once in a while for noon on a weekend to make sure I woke up to make it to lunch.
Oh, see, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and my alarm goes off at 4:45 every morning now.
Yeah.
You know, brutal. Yeah, and then you're pouring caffeine. Sometimes what I do is I end up pouring caffeine into my system so I can perform and do the stuff I need to do at work, you know. I mean,
right.
You know, you have to concentrate to do things like whether you're grading papers, you're in front of a room of 50 people or whatever, and then it's harder to reignite that. I mean, there are some papers that you can redose caffeine later in the day. Like let's say after work, it's time for the gym, but that's really touch and go for me. It's never quite as effective again, and you kind of spent your one peak for the day, and you're right. There's a lot of lifestyle stuff that goes into that.
Yeah, and I find if I have a pretty good known sort of set dose of caffeine and how I feel, like sometimes I've gone a little bit above that, and then you still feel really tired. Then I'm like, uh-oh, this isn't good.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, that's the feasting. That's the airing of grievances. The feats of strength. And again, I don't really have any except I'm. You know what? To me, it's like the Tolkien's long defeat. Like in that world, the elves knew that they were leaving, and they would fight the orcs and the bad guys and this and that, and they knew eventually they would be the ones sort of retreating and leaving. And that's kind of how I am, So I take some solace. Like I still grab 90-pound dumbbells, when I do just dumbbell, benching and stuff like that. Like you were saying, Mike, staying functional on some level instead of doing absolutely nothing and falling so far away from any ability to regain it, sort of. I don't know. So I know that's not going to excite a lot of our people, but you know what? My shoulders won't have it. So, I'm just not going to be pumping up anybody too much when it comes to my feats of strength.
I think as you get older, at least I know I am, I'm so less tolerant of just being even nicked up and dinged up and taking stupid risks in a place that's an ultra-controlled environment. That when I was younger, maybe push the envelope a little bit more. Now I'm just like, it's just not worth the risk to me, I guess, now.
Well, it's to Phil's right. No, I get it. To Phil's point, like at one point, my mom was actually yelling at me because my arms were always going numb. I having some problems with my back and this and that, and I'm just not a very heavily built person, And she's like, "You're lifting too heavy all the time," and it did kind of dawn on me, like, why am I working up to sets with 405? I've done it for 20 years. Why? Like, why? I'm post-competitive. Why am I doing that? Like, we've talked about that before. You can build some pretty decent legs in the 2 1/4 to 315 range. I mean, when it comes to, muscle mass and that sort of thing. So why am I, risking injury and, and worsening whatever kind of compression weirdness I've got going on? Why am I doing that? Because, and again, I know a lot of our lifters, our listeners are, they're weight lifters, they're power lifters, they're about the strength. But on the bodybuilding side, it's not just about that, And so, and again, I think there's some honor in that long defeat kind of thing. Like, I'm going to get older. Yeah. I'm going to get older. But, I mean, like when we talked to Bill Pearl, and he's talking about squatting 315 in his barn with his wife and stuff, and, at 80, I'm like, see, now that's nobility right there.
Yeah.
So,
I think on my end, it's the opposite. I mean, it was learning that, because a lot of my times it was both. It was like, okay, I need to be bigger. I've lost literally inches off my legs from all my surgeries. But I came back and squatted. But I came back and squatted 650.
Yeah.
My legs are much smaller than they were, and it's like the thing I can't handle now, it seems, is the volume. And it's like, well, I'll just have to be okay with that. I go in and hit my sets, and call it a day. And it was like I did 600 for 5 singles a day. I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm okay if I don't do the drop sets and
right.
As long as my chicken legs can squat 700. It's still 700.
Yeah. I've learned that watching powerlifters. There's some guys in the back room at my gym, and I'm like, this guy, his legs are very thin. And I mean thin. I don't know, 20 inches, 21, I would hazard to guess. And I mean, and I watched him do like a single with 405. And I'm like, wait, what? So it is interesting how muscle mass, obviously there's a direct correlation with muscle mass and strength. You got a bigger engine, but at some point it can uncouple, I think, and when you see people that are so strong, it's like what I used to call the Superman effect instead of the Hulk, like it's not all muscle mass driving everything you do, but undeniably the strength is there. You can demonstrate the strength. So,
yep.
Yeah, and I've just wondered how their nervous system is wired, in terms of motor recruitment, and like we've talked about before, even just slight changes in that tendon insertion makes massive differences, especially across, bigger bones like the femur and things like that too. So
Yeah, it's got to be motor. I mean, as in neural, right?
Yeah.
How else could that happen? But the last one is a miracle. What would be a miracle in the fitness world or in the strength world? Phil, what do you think?
God, it would be a miracle if everybody was not so politically correct anymore, and like everybody is just, we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings at all, so anything goes type of thing. That's just it's gotten horrible, to the point of like, one thing that comes to mind is the whole recent thing with the World Championship and weightlifting. And I don't care, basically it's a sport is a sport, and there's rules. And they let, I have nothing against trans athletes. I have them. But, like, they let a dude compete against women. And he beat most of them except for one.
Yeah, that's...
And it was
rough.
for the sake of not hurting anybody's feelings. I'm sorry. It's a fucking sport, and there's rules.
Yeah.
That's it. And, I know there's both sides to this, but, I mean, if you look at the facts, it's blatant that it's just wrong. If it was okay, then basically what you're saying is you should let any female out there take drugs for 30 years up to the levels of a male and then clean up for a year and come in.
Yeah.
That would make it fairly fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, and that's just one, like I'm saying, I think that's just one example. But holy crap. Like, you can't say, I got in trouble the other day on the Iron Radio page. Some guy started going off because I said fibromangina, that thing we always used to joke about. Yeah, you should go look at it. There's a 50 replies like, oh, you're a sexist. No, dude. No, what? I'm talking about men.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just like, quit getting so butthurt over nothing. If you couldn't last 15 minutes in my gym, my ladies would be calling you so many names that you would cry and run out.
I was going to say, to the women in your gym,
yeah, exactly. They're worse than us.
Oh, man.
And
yeah.
It's just, the world has gotten so soft, and it's like, holy crap.
Yeah.
Thicken your skin a little bit, people.
Right. I know, yes. I understand. And listen, Iron Radio is one of the most gender-inclusive podcasts around, right? And it's straight, legitimate, real respect for women. Women can do things men can't. So, like you said, sometimes it's like, well, all right.
and I've said it numerous times. In the last 3 or 4 years, at powerlifting meets, at weightlifting meets, who impresses me recently, who's doing the most progress and doing new shit, it's women.
Oh, by far.
Like this last meet I went at, I was not impressed with any of the guys. But the women were. Now, I mean, you walk in there, and there wasn't a girl in some of the flights not deadlifting 300.
Yeah.
It's like all of them are over that. And it's like, what? It wasn't that long ago. 315 was like a huge milestone. And now it's like, you better be able to do that, or you're not you shouldn't be in the meet. It's like 315 has become the new baseline for women. And it's like, that's freaking amazing.
Was the women top deadlift for the 125, 130 class?
Like,
was it
in
the fives, right?
Yeah, it was like 520. Oof. At 123.
Yeah.
It's insane. Pound for pound, they're killing us.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. It's, and a lot of the, my gym is still 70% women.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and again, you're right. If somebody's going to attack you, they should know these things.
Yeah.
Before they just fly off the handle.
Those are two simple examples of like it doesn't matter what you say now, somebody's going to get butthurt over nothing. It's like, really, of all the things I've said on social media, that's what sets me off, because I say some jacked up stuff. I will put up stuff to purposely see how many, and my wife will laugh because I'm sitting here watching to see how many people unfriend me. It's like, this is amazing. I lost 25 people. That was great. Yeah. But it's just, come on, people. You thicken your skin up a little bit. How would you survive freaking 50 years ago? But,
right.
Anyways.
Well, let's face it. There are, like I said, there are real things that women can do better than men. Like not get destroyed from high volume training. Like, like DOMs, it's pretty well known. Women don't get the same kind of muscle damage that men do, and that kind of stuff. And I've often suggested if they could design a sport around resiliency against getting muscle soreness, muscles destroyed and weakened, and women would be the best in the world at that, and that kind of stuff. So yeah, estrogen in that case for the win.
For God's sakes, childbirth. I take a big poop and I want to cry. I couldn't imagine having a child. You guys are tough.
Right. I actually read once that women they have a higher pain threshold or pain tolerance rather, but then their threshold is actually lower. So at first I thought, oh well, they can handle more. Maybe they don't sense it quite. No, they actually sense it better on the low end, and then they tolerate it better on the high end. So I guess
Yeah.
Yep. All right, folks. Well, there you have it. It's just banter today, some light stuff, right? There was. We had mentioned you were talking about social media, Phil, but I already mentioned this on air. But a few weeks ago, somebody said, "Oh, Iron Radio used to be evidence based." Well, guess what? There's no evidence really in today's episode. So, like you're saying, have some thick skin. Get over it. It's it's Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
Today actually is Festivus. So.
That's right, and it is indeed Festivus. So that's why we covered it. It's timely, damn it. Okay. All right, well, we'll see you.
Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays.
Yeah, see you guys.
Yeah.
Hey, listeners, have you seen the store at IronRadio.org? There are 3 halls in the store, one for Phil, one for Fortress, and one for myself, Dr. Lowry, and they're thematic. So you can go into our Halls of Iron store and choose based on your goal. If you need something to learn or read or something nutritional, you can look in my store, Lonnie's store. If you want something about injury prevention or competition, then take a look at Phil's Hall of Iron. And if you want something about motivation or daily training, Fortress's Hall has what you're looking for. There are some fun, heroic descriptors as you browse through the stores. We try to make it a little more fun than the average boring online store. And whether you're a novice lifter or someone more experienced, you can take heart that you're not wasting your time. The things that we put in each Hall of Iron are actually based on our own recommendations. Protein powders that we know to be good, knee sleeves, wraps of some kind, things that Fortress uses in his own training. The stuff you see, is good. This way you don't waste time. So check out the Iron Radio store at ironradio.org and let us know what you think on the forums. And certainly you can request products and we will screen them before they go in. So thanks for listening. Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation or maybe buying something from the ironradio.org store. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community. The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.